The stars had always been silent. For 300 years, humanity reached into the darkness and found nothing but empty worlds and cold rocks. They built colonies on 12 different star systems. They created cities on moons and stations in the void. And through it all, they believed they were alone. They were wrong. Admiral Taiho was drinking his morning tea when the first distress signal arrived. He was 57 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. But those battles had been against other humans, pirates, rebels, small conflicts on distant colonies. Nothing had prepared him for the message that appeared on his screen. Unknown vessels detected near Navara 7. Count, approximately 500. Design, non-human. They are not responding to communication attempts. Colony requests immediate assistance. Taiho set down his tea. His hands did not shake. He had trained himself long ago to stay calm when others would panic. He pressed the emergency button on his desk and spoke one word: war. Across the galaxy on the colony world of Navara 7, people looked up at the sky and saw darkness. The ships blocked out the stars. They were massive beyond imagination, each one larger than any human vessel ever built. They hung in the sky like metal mountains, silent and terrible. Then the message came. It broadcast on every frequency, in every language humanity had ever spoken. The voice was deep and cold, like grinding stone. We are the Kelthari Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 40,000 years. We have conquered 3,000 worlds and 500 species. None have resisted. None have survived resistance. You will submit to imperial rule within one standard galactic week. Your resources, your technology, and your people will serve the Empire. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. Submit or be erased. The message ended. The ships remained. On Earth, the United Earth Coalition called an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation gathered in the Great Hall in Geneva. They argued and shouted and demanded answers that no one had. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Most simply sat in stunned silence, trying to understand that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and that their new neighbors wanted them dead or enslaved. Ambassador Yuna was 43 years old. She had spent her life talking to difficult people and finding solutions to impossible problems. She had ended 3 civil wars with nothing but words. Now she stood before the gathered leaders of humanity and spoke. "I will go to them," she said. "I will speak with them. I will find out what they truly want." "They told us what they want," someone shouted. "They want us to kneel." Yuna smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Then I will tell them that humanity does not kneel." The diplomatic cruiser Dawn's Edge carried Yuna toward the Kelthari fleet. She stood alone in the communication room as the holographic projector activated. Light filled the chamber, and she found herself facing a creature from Nightmare. Overlord Vorith was ancient. His species lived for thousands of years, and he had ruled the Empire for the last 3,000 of those years. He stood 12 feet tall, covered in dark scales that shimmered like oil on water. His eyes were yellow and slitted like a serpent's. 4 arms extended from his massive body, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. He looked at Yuna the way a giant might look at an insect. "So," Vorith said, his voice rumbling through the chamber. "The small one sent a speaker. How amusing. I had expected begging by now. Your kind is so fragile, so brief. You live, what, 80 years? I have furniture older than your entire civilization." Yuna did not step back. She did not bow. She stood straight and met those terrible yellow eyes. "I am Ambassador Yuna of the United Earth Coalition. I have come to discuss terms." Vorith laughed. The sound was like thunder rolling through mountains. Terms? There are no terms. There is only submission. Every species we have encountered has learned this truth. The strong rule. The weak serve. This is the natural order of all things. And what happens, Una asked quietly, to species that refuse? Vorith leaned forward. His eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. They become memories. We have erased 17 species entirely. Not conquered, erased. Their worlds are empty now. Their names are forgotten. Their children's children are dust. This is what awaits those who resist the Empire. The threat hung in the air between them. Una knew he was telling the truth. She could see it in his eyes. He had destroyed entire civilizations and felt nothing but satisfaction. She smiled. Vorith's eyes narrowed. He had seen many things in his long life. He had seen species beg and plead and cry. He had seen brave warriors tremble before him. But he had never seen a small, fragile creature smile at him like this. "Why do you show teeth?" He demanded. "You cannot win. Your ships are toys compared to ours. Your weapons are primitive. Your numbers are insignificant. You are nothing. We are human," Una said simply. "And you have never met anything like us." She stepped closer to the hologram, close enough that she could see the confusion in those ancient eyes. "You have conquered species that knew peace. Species that evolved on gentle worlds with kind suns. Species that never had to fight for survival. But humanity? We grew up on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages that covered our planet in frost. We survived asteroids that darkened our skies. We survived plagues that killed half our population. And most importantly, we survived each other." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We have been fighting since before we could walk upright. We have never known peace. Not true peace. We fight over land and resources and ideas and pride. We are small and fragile and brief, as you say. But we have never, in all our bloody history, learned how to give up." Vorith stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed again, but this time there was something different in the sound. Something uncertain. Brave words from a dying species. "You have 1 week. Then we come for your worlds." The hologram vanished. Una stood alone in the silent chamber. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She activated her communicator and spoke to Admiral Tai-Ho. "They will not negotiate. They will come for us. Then we will be ready," Tai-Ho replied. "All of humanity, together." On the Kelthari flagship, Vorith sat on his throne and considered the strange human female. Saloom, his high advisor, stood nearby. She had watched the entire exchange. "An interesting creature," Saloon said carefully. "A fool," Vorith replied. "They will break like all the others." But Saloon had seen something in the human's eyes. Not fear, not desperation. Something else entirely. Something the Kelthari had not faced in a very long time. Hope, and hope. Saloon knew was the most dangerous thing in the universe. The week passed like a heartbeat. Humanity did not surrender. Instead, they did something the Kelthari had never seen before. They united. For the first time in human history, every nation, every colony, every single person stood under one flag. Old enemies shook hands. Ancient grudges were forgotten. The factories that once built cars and phones now built weapons. The scientists who once argued over research funding now worked together in secret bunkers. Children who once played games now trained to pilot drones. When the Kelthari fleet moved toward the colony, world of Dayan 4, they expected surrender. They expected fear. They expected the same thing they had seen 500 times before. They found something else, entirely. Fleet Commander Macros led the assault personally. He was Vorath's most trusted warrior, a brutal creature who had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. He sat in his command chair and watched the small human colony grow larger on his view screen. "Begin bombardment," he ordered. "Level their cities. Show them the cost of defiance." The first wave of missiles launched toward the planet. They were intercepted. Human fighters, small and fast, appeared from behind the colony's moons. They flew directly into the missile barrage, destroying what they could and dying in the process. That Akros watched with mild annoyance. "Send ground forces. Take the survivors as slaves." The Kelthari dropships descended like metal rain. Thousands of Imperial soldiers, each one bred for war, each one armed with weapons that could cut through steel like paper. They expected to find crying civilians and broken defenders. They found Wujin. Commander Wujin was 52 years old. His face was covered in scars from a dozen conflicts. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion, the Europa Crisis, and the Titan Uprising. He had buried more friends than he could count. And now he stood in the capital city of Dayan 4 with 3,000 soldiers and twice that number of armed civilians. "They're coming," his lieutenant reported. "Thousands of them." Wujin nodded. He looked at the men and women around him, soldiers, teachers, factory workers, parents, all of them holding weapons, all of them terrified, all of them refusing to run. "Listen to me," Wujin said, his voice carrying across the square. "They think we will break. They think we will beg. They have conquered 500 species, and every single one surrendered eventually." He paused and smiled his crooked smile. "But they have never fought humans. We do not have a word for surrender. We only have a word for victory. And we only have a word for death. Nothing in between." The Kelthari attacked at dawn. The battle was brutal beyond imagination. The Kelthari soldiers were bigger, stronger, and better armed. They pushed through the streets like a flood. But for every step forward, they paid in blood. Humans attacked from windows and rooftops. They set traps in buildings and explosives in streets. When they ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives. When they ran out of knives, they fought with their hands. Macros watched the battle reports with growing confusion. His soldiers were dying. Not many compared to the humans, but more than he had ever lost against a primitive species. And worse, the humans would not stop fighting. "Commander," one of his officers reported, "we have captured prisoners. They are wounded but alive. Should we begin interrogation?" "Yes," Macros said. "Find out how they coordinate their defenses." Among the prisoners was Hana. She was 38 years old, a scientist who studied alien life forms. She had been on Dahan 4 to examine some unusual bacteria when the invasion began. She had taken up arms like everyone else. She had killed 3 Kelthari soldiers before they captured her. The Kelthari interrogation was not gentle. They had machines that could read thoughts, devices that could cause pain beyond human understanding. They strapped Hana to a metal table and began their work. Hours later, the interrogator reported to Macros with something like fear in his voice. "She will not break, Commander. Impossible. The neural probes should have destroyed her will by now." "I know. But she keeps ... fighting. Her brain should have shut down from the pain. Instead, she screams insults at us. She threatened to kill my family. She does not even know if I have a family." The interrogator shook his head. "There is something wrong with these creatures. Their minds do not work like others." In orbit above the planet, a young pilot named Jiho led what remained of his squadron against the Kelthari fleet. There were 12 of them left, flying outdated fighters against warships the size of mountains. "This is suicide," one of his wingmen said over the radio. "Yes," Jiho agreed. "But we will make them remember us." They flew directly at the Kelthari command ship. It was a vessel called the Emperor's Fury, 3 kilometers long and armed with enough weapons to destroy a moon. The Kelthari gunners laughed as they targeted the tiny human fighter's dot. Then Jiho did something unexpected. Instead of attacking, he accelerated. He pushed his fighter to maximum speed and aimed directly at the ship's shield generator. His wingmen followed. The shields flickered and died as the first fighter crashed into them. The second fighter hit the generator itself. The third and fourth carved burning holes through the outer hull. By the time Jiho reached the ship, there was a gap in the defenses. He flew through fire and death, his fighter falling apart around him, and crashed directly into the bridge. The Emperor's Fury, pride of the Imperial fleet, broke apart in a spectacular explosion that lit up the sky over DAEHAN-4 Gade stared at the wreckage in disbelief. He had lost his best ship to primitive creatures in primitive vessels, to pilots who flew to their deaths without hesitation. He sent a message to Overlord Voreth. The words were difficult to speak. The humans are problematic. Voreth received the message on his flagship. He read it 3 times. He had never received such a message before. Every species broke eventually. Every species learned to fear. But these humans, increase the fleet, he ordered. We will crush them with numbers. Back on Dahan 4, Commander Wuzhen gathered his surviving forces. They had lost the city. Half his people were dead. But they had made the Kelthari bleed. We're going to rescue the prisoners, he announced. That's impossible, his lieutenant said. They're held in the enemy camp. Thousands of guards, I know. Wujin checked his weapon and looked at the soldiers around him. The galaxy thinks we are weak because we are young. They think we are foolish because we are small. Let us teach them what young means. It means we have not yet learned how to give up. It means we still believe we can do the impossible. He raised his fist. Tonight, we show them what humanity really is. We show them that we will never stop fighting. We will never stop coming. We will rescue our people, or we will die trying. And either way, the Kelthari will learn to fear the dark. The soldiers raised their fists in answer. That night, 200 humans attacked a camp of 5,000 Kelthari soldiers. They should have died in the first minute. Instead, they fought for 3 hours. They rescued 112 prisoners, including Hana. When Macros arrived with reinforcements, he found something written in the dirt outside the destroyed camp. Human words translated into the Kelthari language. We are coming for all of you. For the first time in his long career, Fleet Commander Macros felt a chill run down his spine. Not fear, exactly, but something close to it, something like respect. 3 months into the war, the galaxy began to whisper. The Kelthari had taken 4 human colonies. They had killed millions. They had burned cities to ash and turned oceans to steam. By every measure, they were winning. But the whispers told a different story. The humans are still fighting. These words spread across 3,000 conquered worlds like fire through dry grass. Species who had served the Empire for centuries, who had forgotten what resistance meant, suddenly remembered. They gathered in secret places and spoke in hushed voices. They destroyed the emperors. Fury, they killed Commander. Macros's entire personal guard. They will not surrender. On the prison world of Kelthar 9, where millions of slaves worked in darkness, an old creature from a long-conquered species looked up at the stars and smiled for the first time in 50 years. There is hope, he whispered to his children. Finally, there is hope. Overlord Voreth did not understand hope. He understood power. He understood fear. He understood the simple truth that the strong ruled and the weak obeyed. This had been the way of things for 40,000 years, but reports were coming in that made no sense. "My lord," Saloon said carefully, "there have been incidents on 17 subjugated worlds. Slaves refusing to work, guards being attacked, symbols appearing on walls." "What symbols?" Saloon hesitated. "The humans broadcast a symbol before their battles. A fist raised against the stars. This symbol is now appearing on worlds we have held for millennia. Vorath's claws dug into his throne. Execute the troublemakers. Make examples of them." "We have, my lord." "They keep coming. Some of them smile as they die. They say words in a human language. Our translators believe the words mean humanity is coming. In the secret bunkers of Earth, Admiral Taiho planned something desperate. He gathered his best officers in a dark room and showed them a holographic map of the galaxy. "The Kelthari supply lines run through here," he said, pointing to a region of space filled with asteroid fields and radiation clouds. "If we cut these lines, their fleet will starve. They will have to retreat or risk losing everything." "That region is death," one of the officers said. "The radiation alone would kill our pilots within hours." "I know." Taiho's voice was heavy. "I am asking for volunteers to fly into hell. I am asking for people willing to die so that others might live." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, hands went up. Every officer, every pilot, every single person in the room, who felt tears burn in his eyes, but he did not let them fall. "We need 10,000 pilots. We have 30,000 volunteers. Tell them their children will remember their names." While humanity prepared for its desperate strike, Saloon did something forbidden. She accessed the Imperial archives and began studying human history. What she found terrified her. Page after page of war, century after century of conflict. Humans killing humans over land, over beliefs, over pride. Weapons that could destroy cities. Weapons that could poison the air for generations. Weapons that humans created not to fight other species, but to fight each other. She read about something called world wars. Millions dead. Cities burned. And yet, humanity rebuilt. They always rebuilt. She read about plagues that killed half their population. They survived. She read about an asteroid that killed the great beasts that once ruled their world. And from the ashes, humans rose. They evolved on a death world, Saloon whispered to herself. Their own planet tried to kill them. Their own kind tried to kill them. And they not only survived, they conquered their world. She understood now why the Kelthari were struggling. Every species the Empire had conquered came from peaceful worlds. They evolved in safety. When faced with overwhelming force, they surrendered because they had never needed to fight for survival. But humans were different. Humans were born fighting. They would never stop. Ambassador Yuna stood before a camera on the last free human broadcast station. Behind her, Earth burned. The Kelthari blockade had begun bombarding the planet, destroying cities one by one. But the cameras still worked. The message would still go out. "I am speaking to every enslaved world in the galaxy," Yuna said, her voice calm despite the explosions in the distance. "I am speaking to every species that has forgotten what freedom means. I am speaking to you." She stepped closer to the camera. "We are humanity. We are small. We are young. We have been fighting this war for 3 months, and we have lost much. But we are still here. We are still fighting. And we will never stop." Her eyes seemed to look directly at every slave, every prisoner, every forgotten soul in the Empire. The Kelthari have ruled for 40,000 years because no one ever said no. No one ever fought back. No one ever showed the galaxy that resistance was possible. But now, we are proof. If we can fight, so can you. She raised her fist, the symbol that had spread across 1,000 worlds. We are coming, not just to save ourselves, but to save all of you. Rise up, fight back. Let the Empire know that its time is ending. A new age is beginning. An age where the weak are no longer afraid. An age where tyrants fall. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions of enslaved beings watched in secret. Some wept, some trembled. Some raised their own fists in the darkness of their cells. On his flagship, Vorath watched the broadcast in silence. Saloon stood beside him, watching his face. She is dangerous, Vorath said finally. Yes, my lord. Not because of what she says. Words are nothing. But because. He trailed off, struggling to find the concept. The Kelthari had no word for it. Because they believe her, Saloon said quietly. The slaves. The conquered. They believe that humanity can win. And belief is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Vorath turned to look at his advisor. His yellow eyes were troubled in a way she had never seen before. What are these creatures, Saloon? What are humans? Saloon thought for a long moment before answering. They are survivors, my lord. They come from a world that should have killed them 1,000 times over. They fight wars that would destroy other species. They create weapons that could burn their own planet. And yet they endure. They adapt. They refuse to die. She paused. We have conquered species that knew peace. We have never faced a species that was born in war. Vorath was silent. Then he felt something in his chest. Something cold and unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it, not fear. He had not felt fear in 3,000 years. He had forgotten what it was like. But looking at the image of that small human female with her raised fist, he felt it now. For the first time, Overlord Vorath wondered if the Empire might lose. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 10,000 human pilots flew toward their deaths, singing songs their grandparents had taught them, ready to light a fire that would burn across the galaxy. 8 months after first contact, the Kelthari came for Earth. 2,000 warships emerged from hyperspace, blocking out the sun. It was the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled against a single world. Enough firepower to burn the planet 10 times over. Enough soldiers to conquer 100 civilizations. Admiral Tayo watched them come from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dawn. He had 300 ships to defend humanity's home. 300 against 2,000. All ships. This is Admiral Tayo. His voice was steady, though he knew most of them would die today. Today we fight for Earth. Today we fight for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of tomorrow. They think we are weak. They think we will break. Show them what humanity is made of. 300 voices answered as one. For Earth. For humanity, forever. The battle began. Kelthari weapons lit up the darkness like angry stars. Human ships exploded in brilliant flowers of fire. But for every human ship that died, a Kelthari vessel paid the price. The humans fought with desperate fury, ramming damaged ships into enemy formations, launching missiles at point-blank range, dying with their fingers still on the triggers. In orbit, the Kelthari deployed weapons they had never used before. Planet killers. Devices that could crack a world like an egg. They aimed them at Earth's major cities, ready to end humanity with a single strike. They did not expect the mines. Humanity had spent the last 8 months preparing for this moment. They had hidden nuclear devices in the asteroid belt, in the orbital debris, in the hollow shells of destroyed ships. As the Kelthari fleet moved into position, the mines activated. 100 Kelthari vessels disappeared in nuclear fire. Then another 100. The fleet scattered in confusion as more explosions rippled through their formation. What is happening? The Kelthari fleet commander screamed. How are they doing this? The answer came from the planet below. Humanity was not just fighting with ships. They were fighting with everything they had. On the ground, Commander Wuzhen led the defense of Seoul. The city had been chosen as humanity's last capital after the others fell. 30 million people lived within its walls. 30 million people the Kelthari wanted to enslave. The first drop pods hit like meteors, slamming into the streets and buildings. Kelthari soldiers emerged, elite warriors in armor that could stop human bullets. They marched through the city with confidence. They found a city that refused to die. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a trap. Civilians who had never held weapons fought beside soldiers who had fought for decades. Children guided armed drones through the streets. Old men and women carried ammunition to the defenders. Doctors operated on wounded soldiers while bombs fell around them. Wuzhen fought in the front lines, his uniform soaked in blood, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. A Kelthari soldier broke through the barricade and charged at him. Wuzhen was out of ammunition. He picked up a piece of broken metal and threw himself at the creature. The Kelthari was bigger, stronger, better armed. It should have killed Wuzhen in seconds. It took Wuzhen 30 seconds to kill it instead. He stood over the body, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and looked at the soldiers around him. They die like anything else, he said. Keep fighting. In orbit, pilot Jiho led his squadron toward the Kelthari command ship. He had survived impossible battles. He had become a legend among human forces. Now he faced his final mission. Command, he said into his radio, I'm going in. Jiho, your fighter is damaged. You won't survive. I know. Jiho smiled. He thought about his parents back on Earth, his sister, his friends who had already died. Tell them I did my job. He pushed his broken fighter to maximum speed. Kelthari guns tracked him, firing beams of deadly light. His wingmen sacrificed themselves to clear his path. One by one, they fell. One by one, they made his journey possible. Jiho broke through the last line of defense. The command ship's bridge loomed before him. He could see Kelthari officers through the windows, pointing at him in disbelief. He activated his communication system one last time, for everyone who never got to see the stars. The impact was spectacular. The command ship's bridge disappeared in a ball of fire. The vessel lost control, spinning into two other Kelthari ships. 3 capital ships destroyed by one pilot in a broken fighter. The Kelthari fleet reeled in shock. Confusion spread through their formations. Officers waited for orders that never came. On the planet below, Saloon made her choice. She had watched the battle from a secure bunker, monitoring communications, doing her duty as the Empire's high advisor. But something had changed inside her. Watching the humans fight, watching them die for each other, watching their impossible courage, she understood something. The Empire was wrong. It had always been wrong. She contacted Ambassador Yuna through a secret channel. I want to help, Saloon said. Yuna studied her through the holographic display. Why should we trust you? Because I am tired. Saloon's voice broke. Tired of watching the Empire destroy everything beautiful in the galaxy. Tired of serving masters who care nothing for life. The humans have shown me what courage looks like. I want to see what happens next. She transmitted a data package. Every Kelthari communication code. Every defense frequency. Every secret the Empire possessed. This is everything, Saloon said. Use it well. Yuna received the data with steady hands. Then she smiled. You will see what happens next, Saloon. I promise you. The battle raged for hours. The humans were losing. Their ships were falling. Their cities were burning. But they would not stop fighting. They would never stop fighting. And then something appeared at the edge of the solar system. Ships. Hundreds of ships. Thousands of ships. They were not human. They were not Kalthari. They were something else entirely. A message broadcast across all frequencies in 100 different languages. We are the free worlds. We were slaves. We were conquered. We were forgotten. But we watched humanity fight. We watched them refuse to kneel. And we remembered what we once were. The voice paused. We are coming to stand with our brothers and sisters of Earth. The age of the Empire is over. The age of freedom has begun. Ships from a dozen species humanity had never met formed into battle lines. Creatures that had been enemies for centuries now flew side by side. All of them flying toward the Kalthari fleet. All of them flying under one banner. Vorath watched from his flagship in disbelief. His empire. His perfect, eternal empire. Crumbling before his eyes. How? He whispered. How is this possible? Saloon's words echoed in his mind. They believe that humanity can win. And belief is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. On the bridge of the eternal dawn, Admiral Taiho looked at the approaching Allied fleet. For 2H. First time in 8 months, he allowed himself to hope. All ships, he said, his voice filled with emotion. We are not alone anymore. Let's show them how humans say thank you. The combined fleet charged toward the Kalthari Armada, and the galaxy held its breath. 1 year after first contact, the final battle began. The combined fleet of humanity and the liberated worlds crashed into the Kalthari Armada like a hammer against glass. Ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The darkness of space became bright with fire and death. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Empire faced something it had never encountered. An alliance of species fighting together. Not because they were forced to. Not because they were afraid. But because they believed. They believed in humanity. They believed in freedom. They believed that the Empire could fall dot, and for the first time in 40,000 years, they were right. Vorath watched his fleet crumble from the bridge of his personal flagship. Ships he had commanded for centuries exploded around him. Officers who had served his family for generations screamed as their vessels were torn apart. My lord, his captain said, his voice trembling, we are losing. The fleet is breaking formation. Many commanders are surrendering. Surrendering? Vorath could not understand the word. Kalthari do not surrender. They are surrendering to the humans, my lord. They say they would rather live as prisoners than die for a doomed empire. Vorath felt something shatter inside him. Not his body. Something deeper. Something that had held him together for 3,000 years. His pride. He stood from his throne and made a decision that would echo through history. Contact the human leader. I wish to speak with him. Alone. Admiral Taiho received the message with surprise. He was wounded, exhausted, covered in the ashes of friends who had died beside him. But when he heard that Vorath wanted a meeting, he agreed without hesitation. They met on a neutral station, far from the battle. Taiho came with only Ambassador Yuna by his side. Vorath came alone. The overlord of the Kalthari Empire towered over the two humans. His scales were damaged, his eyes tired. He looked at Taiho with something that might have been curiosity. You are smaller than I expected, Vorath said. You are exactly as big as I expected, Taiho replied. It changes nothing. Vorath was silent for a moment. Then he asked the question that had haunted him since the war began. Why do you fight? You cannot win. Even now, even with your allies, you cannot truly defeat the Empire. We have 3,000 worlds. We have resources beyond counting. Eventually, we will rebuild. Eventually, we will return. So why do you fight a war you cannot win? Taiho looked at the ancient creature before him. He thought about his wife, dead in the first attack. His son, fighting somewhere in the fleet. His grandchildren, hiding in bunkers on Earth. Maybe we cannot win, he said quietly, but our children might, and their children will, and their children's children will build a galaxy where creatures like you are just stories told to frighten little ones. He stepped closer to Voreth, showing no fear. You think in centuries. You think in single lifetimes, even if those lifetimes span thousands of years. But humans think in generations. We plant trees we will never sit under. We fight wars we will never see end. We build futures we will never live in. He pointed at Voreth's chest. That is why we fight. Not for ourselves. For everyone who comes after. We have always been this way. We always will be. Voreth stared at the small human before him. This creature who should have been nothing. This brief, fragile being who stood before an immortal emperor without trembling. What are you? Voreth whispered. Yuna stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of humanity's answer. We are human. We break. We bleed. We die. But we never stop. We never forget. And we never forgive those who harm our own. She smiled. Welcome to the new galaxy. Taiho activated a device on his wrist. Every word they had spoken had been broadcast across the Empire. Every Kelthari ship. Every conquered world. Every corner of space that received a signal. The galaxy watched their invincible overlord confronted by a mortal. Man who did not flinch. They watched the Emperor of 1,000 generations stand speechless. Before two small creatures who refused to kneel, the effect was immediate. Kelthari commanders, who had been fighting, turned off their weapons. Ships that had been advancing stopped in place. Officers who had served the Empire their entire lives looked at each other and asked a question they had never asked before. Why are we fighting for him? The answer was nothing. Pride, tradition, fear of what would happen if they stopped. But now they had seen something new. They had seen defiance. They had seen courage. They had seen that it was possible to say no. Within hours, the Kelthari fleet surrendered. Not to superior force, not to overwhelming power, but to an idea. The idea that the strong did not have to rule. The idea that fear was not the only way to lead. The idea that even the mightiest empire could fall when enough people simply refused to be afraid. Voreth was taken prisoner. His empire, which had lasted 40,000 years, dissolved in a single day. Across 3,000 worlds, chains were broken. Prisons were opened. Slaves walked free for the first time in generations. A new galactic federation was formed, with humanity as one of the founding members. Not because they were the strongest, not because they had the most ships, but because they had taught the galaxy something it had forgotten. Hope, monuments were built to those who had fallen. Jiho's name was carved in stone on every human world. The 10,000 pilots who flew into the radiation zone were remembered as the Angels of Eclipse. Commander Wujin's defensive soul became a story told to children across the galaxy. Hana, the scientist who had been tortured and never broken, led the new First Contact protocols. She welcomed species who came to meet humanity, showing them the same compassion she had shown during the darkest days of the war. Wujin retired from the military and became a teacher. He taught history to alien students who could not believe that one species had endured so much and kept going. Humans are strange, a young Kelthari student said to him once. You fight each other. You hurt each other. You do terrible things to your own kind. And yet, when danger comes, you unite. Why? Wujin thought for a long moment. Because we are family, he said finally. Family fights. Family disagrees. Family sometimes hates each other. But when something threatens family, everything else disappears. We become one. We have always been this way. We always will be. Saloon became an ambassador, bridging the gap between the former empire and the new federation. She wrote her memoirs in her final years, and the opening lines became famous across the galaxy. We thought humanity was young. We were wrong. They are ancient, not in years, in experience. They were forged by fire, flood, and their own endless wars. They do not conquer. They endure. And that is far more terrifying than any weapon. Years later, Admiral Taiho stood at a viewing window on Earth's largest space station. He was old now, his hair white, his body tired. But his eyes were still sharp as he watched the first joint human-alien colony ship launch toward a distant star. Yuna stood beside him. She was gray-haired now, a grandmother, but still as sharp-tongued as ever. "Do you think they will remember us?" she asked. "I think they will tell stories," Taiho said. "Stories about a time when humanity stood alone against the darkness. Stories about ordinary people who refused to kneel. Stories about a small species from a small world that changed everything." He smiled. "And when those stories are told 1,000,000 years from now, on worlds we cannot imagine, someone will look up at the stars and ask, what were humans really like?" Yuna laughed softly. "And what will the answer be?" Taiho looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that would never be the same. "We were stubborn," he said. "We were foolish. We were brave beyond reason and kind beyond measure. We fought. We failed. We got back up. We loved too much and forgave too little. We planted seeds for trees we would never see." He placed his hand against the glass. "We were human. And that was enough." The colony ship disappeared into the stars, carrying the first generation of a new era. Behind it, 1,000 other ships waited for their turn. Human ships, alien ships, former enemies now flying together toward a shared future. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere, in the great darkness between stars, humanity's song echoed on forever.